So now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Kate Hubert as our presenter tonight, and she is going to give us a talk entitled The Body of Stars, the Body Through the Lens of Astrology. Kate Hubert has been a professional astrologer since 1999, her work being influenced by esoteric and Jungian astrologies and a deep love of druidry. She studied astrology with the Faculty of Astrological Studies and a 3-year apprenticeship with Suzanne Ruff of the DK Foundation. And her book, The Body of Stars, Astrology and the Wisdom of the Body, has been critically acclaimed. Kate's interest is in how the cosmos interweaves with the microcosm human, helping us to take hold of both astrology and the art of being human in a deeper way. She's based in South Devon, where she offers in-person and Skype consultations, teaching and mentoring. In this talk, Kate explores the premise that the body is fundamental to our experience of the evolutionary pressure of life, which the birth chart describes, and to our perception of life generally. Astrologically understood, health challenges reveal the body's intelligence, its own poetic logic, guiding us out of patterns of conditioning towards what is vitally required for health, wholeness, and authenticity. Looking at some case studies, we'll see how illness and injury meaningfully relate to personal evolution. And in turn, this will give us a deep, intriguing appreciation of what the body is and of the meaning it contains. You can find her on the web at arwenastrology.wordpress.com. And as I said before, there'll be a chance to ask questions at the end of it. Welcome, Kate, and it's over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Christine, and thank you to Aquarius 7 for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here and to offer some reflections. And I've been assured that Aquarius 7 loves looking at charts, so we're going to have a look at quite a lot of charts. But before I start screen sharing, I thought I would just try and introduce you to how I got involved with this aspect of astrology. And in my life experience, it was the shock of my father being diagnosed with cancer that got me involved with astrology, druidry, and healing all at the same time. I just needed to find a response to this situation. And then as soon as I started learning astrology, I realized that every body part and process was under the rulership of a sign or planet. And that made me start thinking, well, then if somebody, for example, has cancer in a particular part of the body, is that significant? Is that symbolically significant? Is the body part that's affected somehow trying to convey to the person what needs to be remedied? Or is it just random? And I felt that in the course of my studies that there's nothing very random about what happens to the body, even when it's an accident, what we call an accident. That we can all see the astrological significators that are involved. And it struck me that perhaps we can start listening to the body and decoding it as a symbolic system. And when you think about it, everything you know about life, everything you know at all, every experience you have, every aspect of your life is conveyed to you by your body and your sensory apparatus. There's nothing that comes to us that isn't filtered through our perception. And as we as astrologers know, our perception is conditioned, for example, by when Mercury is in the chart, but by other things as well. And so the state that our body is in, for example, somebody who's in chronic pain is going to have a very different perception and experience of life to someone who is healthy and comfortable. And so what intrigues me here, because this isn't just medical astrology, although there's aspects of that, what intrigues me is the symbolic significance of the body and how it seems to be speaking to our personalities, but also the felt sense of the body. So there's a kind of Virgo aspect to understanding what the body might be about. And there's a kind of Taurian aspect to understand what is the felt sense of the body, what is the body as a resource. And well, let's start screen sharing and I'll talk more about this. So there's the cover of the book. Astrology and the Wisdom of the Body. And here is a picture of the goddess Nut, she who holds 1,000 stars. And she is the cosmos in this, holding this pose, this arch, this zodiacal arch over the earth. And every morning she gives birth to the sun, and it travels through her starry body, across the front of her starry body and into her mouth at night. And I love this illustration because it shows that there's something really generative about the cosmos. This is this place of vitality and aliveness, this sun that's being given birth to, a bit like we are given birth to, and our souls over and over again given birth to different lives on earth. And she is in this situation of making love with the earth all the time. And then I think it's the father of the earth comes to separate the lovers. And it feels like everything that is here on earth is somehow trying to transmit between heaven and earth and hold them in a balance together to heal the breach of this separation. And many of you will be familiar with this illustration from the Duke de Berry's Book of Hours. It's a 15th century illustration, and there's many different versions of the zodiacal man. And we see the human being surrounded by the cosmos, and each part of the human being occupied by a sign of the zodiac, indicating its rulership. And there's this lovely intimation of interplay between the cosmos, the celestial sphere, and the individual human being. Soul is another name for what the body does. And we're familiar with the idea in astrology that our lifetime is an evolutionary situation. And many astrologers take that view, and that life exerts certain pressures in order to assist the evolution of a soul through the vehicle of a personality. And of course, we come in with a lot of prior experience or other lifetime experience that sets up scripts or fracture lines of conditioning, tracks that we tend to run down. And when we just run down the tracks of our conditioning, we don't necessarily find what is authentic and growthful in this particular lifetime. And we can get stuck in patterns of repeating what we already know and what we've already achieved and accomplished. And this is devitalizing. And the challenge for each lifetime, for each individual, is to find in what direction they need to grow in order to claim their fullest identity, their authenticity, their full libidinous aliveness. And for me, that is shown in the position of the sun which organizes all the other planetary influences. The sun that integrates and bestows conscious identity. And I look at Saturn and the moon as the source of conditioning, which we can also see as the parents. And I would say the parents are emblems of conditioning being brought from other lifetimes. And we are designed to walk across the bridge of our parents in a way. And if we stay on that bridge, we don't evolve. So there is a need to move beyond the influence of the parents, beyond the influence of Saturn and the moon, in order to claim the legacy, our birthright of full, authentic aliveness, which is marked by the sun. It's more complicated than that, but that's the essence of the view that I take. And having done a lot of study of illness and accident, I feel that the kind of illnesses people have are their body's most intelligent way of communicating with them how to come back towards wholeness and towards an orientation that is full of growth. And the shock of illness or accident, as many of you will know, is a real wake-up call. And it's that waking up that's evidenced in the first case study that I've got for you. Now, unfortunately, this case study does not have a birth time, so I'm working with a noon birth chart, so ignore the houses. And this is the case study of someone who's now 59. It's a woman. And you'll notice the stellium in Pisces, part of which is opposed by Uranus and Pluto. Now, Saturn and the moon are both in Aquarius. Of course, we don't know the exact position of the moon, but I think we can safely say that it's going to be squaring Neptune, whatever time this birth is. And Neptune disposits the stellium in Pisces. Now, I'm interested in this case study because of that very fraught Mars conjunct Chiron, Neptune and the Sun, and opposed by Pluto. This is the case of a woman who, when she was 43, she doesn't know how, she was riding her bike home at 11:30 in the evening, and the next thing she knew, she was in hospital and had quite a serious brain injury. She's more or less fully recovered now. But why I've chosen this chart is that in the last year to 18 months, she's developed exactly on the site of the injury, which was on her head, this Mars place of the body. She's developed a sort of nervous tic and is currently seeking help from the hospital in the neurology department. But it interested me that on the site of the injury is where this new symptom has arisen. So I would suggest that it's part of the same pattern. And the pattern being that I would say this person has a powerful and subtle will that she's seeking to develop. And Chiron there shows a sense of woundedness about how that Mars is being expressed, and Pluto is intensifying the will and empowering the will. And yeah, my feeling is that this being bashed right on the head, this Aries place, so this is the place where all the sense information enters the body. It's the directional place in the body. It's where I face, where I'm going, how I'm absorbing information. And if this gets knocked, it suggests to me that there's some difficulty, some dilemma in the lifetime about how the person is expressing their will, how they're choosing their direction. And I don't know actually what was going on in her life when she was 43 and had this accident. But I would imagine it was a time when she was really seeking direction. I do know that she was retraining in her career. But this is a really powerful and fraught Mars. And as we look at the next chart, here is the birth chart in a bi-wheel with the transits. The transits are on the outer wheel. And you'll see here that the North Node is, the transiting North Node is opposite transiting Saturn, and which is conjuncting natal Uranus, and transiting Uranus is conjuncting natal Mars, which is the signature of an accident, isn't it? Mars, Uranus. And it's just interesting thinking of the planets that are involved here, because Saturn, I've said, in my understanding, is an agent of past conditioning. And Saturn becomes a powerful force to serve the soul when it's aligned with the sun, when it's assisting the sun. But when it's operating more in the fear realm, as I'm sure we're all familiar with, when it's operating as fear and blockage, then it tends to derail growth and waking up. And Uranus, of course, is the planet that wakes us up with shocks, with disruption, with accidents, with bolts from the blue. And here this accident arising as Uranus conjuncts Mars, and as transiting Mars is squaring the transiting MC. So this is quite a moment. And this is looking at the solar return chart. Of course, we can't take the moon's position exactly for granted, and we can't take any notice of houses. So this is the time of the accident, the year of the accident, and you'll notice that Mars and Chiron are conjunct in the sign occupied by the moon and Saturn. and Neptune and Mercury are in a conjunction, which suggests a sort of porousness and a kind of the mind being opened to impressions and sensibilities that are highly refined. And Uranus is on the degree of Mars in the natal chart, and it's conjunct the North Node, which is conjunct the Sun. So it feels like this, the year of this accident is a year in which Uranus is guiding the developmental direction signified by the North Node. And Uranus is approaching a conjunction with the Sun, and it's working its way through that stellium in Pisces, kind of releasing energy that this person was born to bring, with this signature of her Sun being conjunct with these other planets. And I find that interesting, with Uranus acting as the agent of almost initiating the soul's direction, sabotaging the plan, sabotaging the direction that the personality wants to go in, and completely lifting a person off the tracks and putting them into a review mode. And it's worth noting that Saturn is opposite Neptune here. So Saturn's being eroded by the force of Neptune and opened up, being subjected to that, the raising of the vibration of Saturn, potentially. Now, this is a solar return chart for last year, when this person who was approaching their Saturn return, their second Saturn return, started experiencing the neurological problem, which was and is highly intrusive, especially as she's a teacher, and so communicating is really important for her, and yet she's got this massive spasm going on in her eye. And it was this spasm, seeing this spasm, that made me think, well, there's something Uranian happening there. There's a pattern being broken up. And that's when I started looking at her chart. And so we see here Pluto and Mars and Venus in a conjunction with each other. And of course, Mars and Pluto are opposite each other natally. The part of the body that's injured is the Mars part of the body. The moon here is in the same sign as the natal North Node. And the Sun is flanked by the two rulers of its sign, Pisces, which feels like it's really under pressure to identify its Piscean character. And I think when someone has such a powerful will, and yet they're a Piscean sun, it feels to me like this person needs to identify how to use their will in service to life. That if she just uses her will to pursue her own ends, I think that doesn't satisfy her son. It's when her energy, her drive, her power is channeled through her in service to life itself. That's when I think that some resolution can come. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. But yeah, so I was choosing this because of the repeat sight, the accident, and then the symptom following on years afterwards. The accident was in 2007, so it's like 14, 15 years afterwards, the symptom comes back and says, this hasn't been cleared. There's something still wanting to be expressed here, something that needs to be understood and integrated, something about the will, something perhaps about how this person is directed towards life. And it might be worth saying that my research at the moment is on transgenerational trauma, and I see the same patterns of pathology and injury happening through various iterations through different generations of a family. And I said to this person that I'd noticed that, and that I didn't think that she was the first person in her family to suffer a blow to the head. And she said, well, funnily enough, even when I was 18 months old, my mum was cycling along with me, sitting on the back of her bicycle in a child seat. And I just tumbled out the chair and fell into the bushes. And that's funny because that experience is kind of sitting inside her, this fall onto her head at 18 months old. And then when she's 43, just after the Uranus opposition, she falls into the bushes again, but in a more devastating way. So I hope that gives some kind of impression of the way I'm approaching this. This is the second case, and perhaps it's my age, but here's another person who's just having their second Saturn return, just had their second Saturn return. And this is another client who started experiencing a whole medley of entirely anomalous, undiagnosable symptoms. She had an infection in her finger that persisted despite repeat courses of antibiotics, neuralgia, spasm, and odd nerve symptoms. I would suggest that's Mercury, Uranus stuff. Joint pain, coldness, and stiffness, Saturn. Problems with her hip and referred pain in the shin. The hip, I would see, as Jupiter, 9th house, and here we can see the Sun and Mars in the 9th house. And it's interesting that it referred into the shin because she's an Aquarius Sun, and Aquarius rules the shin. There was also muscle wastage in the thigh and buttock. I would say things to do with the muscles are Mars, and wastage, that seems Neptunian to me. She was experiencing terrible fatigue, again Mars and Neptune, insomnia, Uranus, and loads of fear and anxiety. And when I look at this chart, I mean, when I start looking at charts, I often think, what's the dilemma? What's the difficulty? Because it's very often the thing that's really difficult to come to terms with consciously ends up manifesting through the body. It's almost like it spills out of the unconscious and starts manifesting through the body as the only way of communicating with the personality. So I look for the dilemma in a chart, the thing that's difficult. And here, the thing that seems most difficult to me is Saturn sitting right on the midheaven, which says life is hard. And I feel that at the second Saturn return, it's really time to be reaping the rewards of Saturn, to be finding the benefit of Saturn, and not to be its prisoner anymore. So I feel, in a way, all of these symptoms that she was experiencing as she was approaching her Saturn return are, in a way, trying to help her interrogate this Saturn situation and her tendency to feel that life is hard for her. Life's hard for me. And you'll notice that the Sun and Mars are in conjunct Uranus and Pluto. This chart really interests me. I don't know what happened to this person when she was 4, but there's like 4 degrees between the Sun and Mars, between Chiron and Venus, and between Uranus and Pluto. So I think that might have been a very significant time for her. And I don't suppose it's something that she necessarily remembers, but something may have been laid down then that may well manifest through the body in terms of health throughout the lifetime. And so, as well as looking at the dilemma in the chart and the thing that's difficult for consciousness to take hold of, I also look for the body in the 2nd house and the 6th house. And the 2nd house, I think, gives a person's felt sense of their body, their somatic sense, their experience of physicality. And the 6th house is much more their way of going about dealing with the practical matters of having a body, and how to deal with it when it goes wrong. So here's the secondary progress chart of this person when she was experiencing the most intense range of symptoms. And it was very interesting because she was desperately looking for a practitioner. The doctors couldn't help. Going down the regular medical route wasn't working at all. And go back. If we look at where her North Node is, which shows the direction of travel over lifetimes, she's coming into this consciousness of the North Node in Cancer in the 1st house. And this feels to me like it's about the ability to assert care for the self, perhaps also to assert care for others, but primarily I care for myself. So here's the secondary progress chart, and we find here all on 6 degrees progressed Uranus and progressed North Node. So they're really ringing together. They are functioning at a similar resonance when they're occupying the same degree. And Uranus is sitting on the cusp of the progressed 2nd house, the experience of the body. And whilst natal Saturn is on 23 degrees of Aquarius, hugging the midheaven, here we have Mercury hugging the midheaven on 23 of Aries. So Mercury is setting off the resonance of Saturn and perhaps conducting some of that resonance through the nervous system. And Venus also is on 23 degrees, joining in with that resonance and squaring natal Saturn from the sign of Taurus, from the sign of the body. And progressed Saturn is opposite the moon, the natal moon. And since I see those two as the veil of the past, or the agents of mental and emotional conditioning, seeing progressed Saturn opposite the natal moon feels like a real pinch point of that conditioning, a real opportunity to move through some of the pain and limitation of Saturn and breaking through some of the emotional conditioning. And Saturn's also ruling the progressed 6th house. And Mars here, indicating some of that, the muscle problems, is on the 29th degree of Pisces. And I've noticed in many case studies that the 29th degree comes up in association with illness time and time again. So this is one of the anoretic degrees where the energy between one sign and another is changing. So both the energy of both signs is attempting to come through that planetary principle. And obviously adjacent signs are antithetical in their expression, and so that creates a little bit of a crisis. And a crisis is highly productive of consciousness because it affects us, it's difficult. And there's its usefulness. And this time last year, when I was looking at this chart and noticing when progressed Mars goes into 0 degrees of Aries, which was January this year, also coinciding with the progressed Sun moving on to 9 degrees of Aries, and the natal Sun's on 9 degrees of Aquarius, I felt that that would be the time when some improvements would be experienced in this person's condition. And that did seem to coincide with a time when some resolution was experienced, and there's been a gradual improvement throughout the year, and this person's functioning really well and quite healthy again now. But this was a real crisis moment. So let's look at the solar return of this crisis moment. And it's interesting to see that the midheaven is involved again here, with Neptune sitting on top of it. So it's interesting in the natal chart, in the progressed chart, and in the solar return chart, the midheaven is closely conjunct a planet. And I feel like this is very much indicating that this person is needing to step into the world more strongly, to show herself in the world. You'll also see that Mercury and Pluto are in a really tight conjunction. So there is a real perhaps a transformation of her perception, her rationalization, her understanding of herself, perhaps of her partnership as well. At the time when she was ill, her partner was also quite unwell, so it was a real struggle for both of them, and the relationship was certainly involved in bearing the weight of both of them being ill. But with Pluto there, it's indicating that there's a chance for a deep transformation and a clearing away of obsolete personality conditions, if they can be brought to consciousness and recognized. And I feel that's what is involved in a successful movement through a Saturn transit as well. That's a time when we can review our commitments and review circumstances in our life in order to create forms, or allow Saturn to create forms that actually assist our true direction, our true wishes, our heart's desires, rather than kind of doing what we think we should do, or going on in the vein of life is hard, gosh, it's tough, it's tough. So I think this person is has potentially really cleared a lot of that Saturn mantra that she's carried all her life. Chiron is sextiling the Sun on the same degree, again setting off the resonance, feeding that resonance of Chiron into the Sun, showing the depth of the wounding that is felt, and also enlivening perhaps this person's deep understanding of her mortality and her ability to accompany others through difficulty, which is how I see Chiron operating really optimally, is that ability to mentor or walk alongside someone who's struggling or in pain. And it's good to see in this solar return chart that Jupiter is there in the 9th house, supporting the 9th house vibe of this person's Sun-Mars conjunction. And it rules the solar return 6th house and the natal 6th house. So it feels, the indication was that this was that this was a situation that was supported and that would find a good outcome, which I think it has done. But it was a very difficult path, as indicated perhaps by Pluto there. And we can see this, the Sun rules the 2nd house of this chart, which may indicate that an understanding of the body is being brought into the solar consciousness. That will be a resource for her life ongoingly. Okay, I've got one more case study to bring you. This is a young man in his 26, 27 now, and this is the case. Let's just look first. So what's difficult, what's the dilemma in this chart? We have this really weighty stellium in Capricorn, got the Sun exactly on the ascendant, then Mars, Neptune, Uranus, Mercury all conjunct each other. Mars and Neptune on the same degree, Uranus and Mercury on the same degree, on the 29th degree. All in the first house. I think that's really difficult energy to embody and to really to use consciously, I suppose. And it mightn't surprise some of you to know that this person has Asperger's. That Uranus Mercury shows a very unusual mind. And yeah, that Mars and Neptune together in the first house really really difficult to know how to use the will and the aggression and the libido. It feels so porous and overwhelmed. And I said about the 29th degree bringing through the energy of the sign it's in and the sign following. So we've got the energy of both Capricorn and Uranus, Capricorn and Aquarius coming through the Mercury-Uranus conjunction. That's quite intense and strange. And this person is a case study because they broke their ankle, and the ankle is ruled by Mercury, sorry, by Uranus and Aquarius. And I would also look for the ankle in the 11th house, and we see Pluto on the cusp of the 11th house. And the 6th house of health is ruled by that challenged Mercury. So this is the solar return chart. For the year of the broken ankle. And you'll see the moon conjunct Mars. And Venus, Pluto, Mercury, all together there in the 7th house. Saturn in the 8th. And this is the year of Saturn squaring Uranus, and it's quite close here. So those planets on the 29th degree of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn and influenced by Uranus, seem to be spoken of here. It's quite interesting, the effect of this person breaking their ankle. This young man was living on his own when lockdown happened and fell into quite a depression and was unemployed and struggling, and so he went back to the parental home during lockdown and managed to find some work, and gradually his mental state picked up, and he finally moved out independently again, and then not very long afterwards broke his ankle. And the experience of that was that his friends came in around him and supported him, and his partner came in around him and supported him. So there'd been this moment where he retreated back to the parental home and then went out independently again. And in the crisis of breaking his ankle, he was sort of shipped around by all his friends and supported by his partner. And it felt like a time in which he developed some independence away from his identity as the son, and actually got picked up by friends and partner. And Aquarius rules the ankle. It also rules our friendships, doesn't it? And just interesting, that whole Capricorn, Aquarius, Saturn, Uranus thing, with Saturn trying to hold the status quo and Uranus trying to blast it open in order that development can happen, in order that the authentic direction can be discovered, sort of breaking the prison apart. And breaking a bone is a Saturn-Uranus kind of thing, isn't it? And especially ankle Aquarius. So this is looking at the natal chart on a biwheel with the solar return. The solar return's on the outer wheel. And just note how those planets in Capricorn all line up with each other. Again, this thing of resonance, this same string being plucked over and over again. And it seems to me that the body is a resonance instrument, that it picks up these vibrations and reveals them to us by embodying them for us, so that we can see what it is we're dealing with. So the stellium in Capricorn is just really jangled by the visit of these three planets in Capricorn in the solar return. And interestingly, that Moon-Mars conjunction in the solar return is placed in the 11th house of friends. And it was quite interesting to look at the midpoint of Mars and Uranus, which comes out as 26 degrees of the fixed signs and 11 degrees of the cardinal signs. And as the sun is on 10 degrees Capricorn, and so is the ascendant of the natal chart, that gets picked up by the Mars-Uranus midpoint, being emblematic of accidents. And you'll see how Uranus is closing in on the natal IC, perhaps liberating some of the patterns of dependency that have been brought from childhood into youth. And actually helping him effect his separation from his dependency on his parents. Sometimes I think we would lose ourselves altogether if it were not for our stubborn, irrepressible symptoms calling us, requiring us to recollect ourselves and orient ourselves to life. And I hope looking at these charts has kind of helped bring some indications of how accident and illness help us experience the effects of our conditioning and how we might get underneath that conditioning to release ourselves into the fullness of our true identity and to cooperate with our own soulful selves. And I'm going to stop sharing now. That's all I've got prepared to show you. So yeah, thank you for your attention, and I hope that I've conveyed something of what I'm passionate about and that it has made sense to you in some way.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. It was absolutely fascinating deep dive with all those charts to have a look at.